Planets and Gods. A journey through the starlit beliefs of ancient civilizations. A gentle exploration of how humanity saw divine powers in the wandering stars. Opening, the first Watchers. Close your eyes now and let yourself drift backward through time. Imagine a world without electric lights, without the glow of screens, without the constant hum of modern life. Picture instead a vast darkness, broken only by the eternal light of stars. Thousands of years ago, before cities stretched across continents, before books were written or wheels were invented, our ancestors looked up at the night sky with wonder. They had no telescopes, no satellites, no scientific instruments. They had only their eyes, their imaginations, and their deep need to understand the cosmos that stretched endlessly above them. Most stars, they noticed, were fixed in place. Night after night, season after season, the same patterns appeared: the great hunter, the swan, the scorpion, painted across the heavens in points of light. These constellations became friends, guides, stories told and retold around fires that pushed back the darkness. But there were wanderers. 7 lights moved across the sky in paths that seemed purposeful, deliberate, almost alive. The sun, brightest of all, bringing day and warmth. The moon, changing shape in a rhythm that matched the tides and the cycles of women's bodies, and 5 others points of light that looked like stars but refused to stay in one place. These wanderers traced slow, complex paths through the fixed stars, sometimes moving forward, sometimes appearing to stop, sometimes even moving backward in the phenomenon we now call retrograde motion. Our ancestors had no word for planet. That would come later, from the Greek planetes, meaning wanderer. But they knew these lights were different. They were special, and in their specialness, humanity saw something divine. This is the story of how those wandering lights became gods, and how those gods shaped human civilization in ways that echo even into our modern world. It is a story that spans continents and millennia, woven from astronomy and mythology, mathematics and mysticism. It is a tale of Babylonian priests and Egyptian pharaohs, Greek philosophers and Roman emperors, of star charts drawn in ancient temples and horoscopes cast for newborn kings. Settle deeper into your pillow now. Let the weight of the modern world fall away. We are going on a journey through time and space, following the planets as they dance their eternal dance, and listening to the stories that ancient peoples told about these wandering gods in the sky. Part 1. Mesopotamia, where astrology began. Our story begins in Mesopotamia, the land between 2 rivers, where the Tigris and Euphrates flow through what is now Iraq. Here, in the fertile crescent of the ancient world, some of humanity's first civilizations arose. The Sumerians built cities, the Akkadians created empires, and the Babylonians looked to the stars. The Babylonians were farmers and builders, yes, but they were also the world's first true astronomers. Beginning around 1800 BCE, perhaps even earlier, Babylonian priests began keeping careful records of the sky. They built ziggurats, massive stepped pyramids where they could climb closer to the heavens and observe the movements of celestial bodies without the interference of landscape or city walls. Night after night, year after year, century after century they watched. They recorded. They noticed patterns. They saw that the moon completed its cycle of phases every 29.5 days. They observed that certain stars rose at sunset only during specific seasons. And most importantly, they tracked the movements of the 5 visible planets, the wanderers who would eventually bear the names Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. But the Babylonians did not call them by those names. They had their own names, their own gods, their own stories. The brightest wanderer, the one that appeared in the evening sky after sunset or the morning sky before dawn, they called Dilbat. We know it as Venus. To the Babylonians, this planet was associated with Ishtar, the great goddess of love and war, beauty and violence. Ishtar was complex, contradictory. She could bring passionate love or terrible destruction. The planet that bore her name was equally dual in nature, appearing sometimes as the evening star, sometimes as the morning star, so brilliant it could cast shadows. The red wanderer, burning like a coal in the night sky, they called Nergal. We call it Mars. The Babylonians associated this planet with their god of war, death, and destruction. Its ruddy color reminded them of blood, of the violence of battle, of the fires that consumed cities. When Nergal appeared bright in the sky, priests might warn of conflicts to come. The largest wanderer, steady and majestic in its slow journey across the heavens, they called Marduk after their chief god, the king of the gods who had created the world by defeating the chaos monster Tiamat. We call it Jupiter. This planet's measured, dignified movement across the sky seemed fitting for the supreme deity, and its appearance was generally seen as favorable, a sign of royal power and divine order. The slow, distant wanderer that took nearly 30 years to complete its journey through the zodiac, they called Ninurta, a god associated with agriculture, healing, and boundaries. We know it as Saturn. Its slow movement made it seem ancient, patient, connected to the rhythms of long cycles and the passage of generations. And the swift wanderer, hard to see because it stayed close to the sun, they called Nabu, the god of wisdom and writing. We call it Mercury. Its speed and its association with communication and knowledge seemed connected to its quick movement across the sky. The Babylonian priests did not merely observe these wanderers as points of light. They believed the gods spoke through the planets, sending messages to humanity through their movements across the heavens. The position of Jupiter might indicate the favor of the king. The brightness of Venus might herald coming prosperity or war, depending on other factors. Saturn's entry into a particular constellation might suggest a long period of drought or abundance. This was the birth of astrology, the belief that the movements of celestial bodies were not random but meaningful, filled with divine intention, affecting events on Earth. Around 700 BCE, the Babylonians made a breakthrough that would change the history of astronomy and astrology forever. They divided the path that the sun, moon, and planets traveled across the sky, what we now call the ecliptic, into 12 equal sections. Each section was associated with a constellation that appeared in that part of the sky. The zodiac was born: Aries the ram, Taurus the bull, Gemini the twins, Cancer the crab, Leo the lion, Virgo the virgin, Libra the scales, Scorpio the scorpion, Sagittarius the archer, Capricorn the sea goat, Aquarius the water bearer, Pisces the fish. These 12 signs created a calendar, a cosmic clock by which the Babylonians could track not just the passage of time, but the movements of the planets and what those movements might mean. When Mars entered Leo, it meant something different than when it entered Pisces. When Jupiter aligned with Saturn in Taurus, it was an event worth recording, interpreting, perhaps fearing or celebrating. The priests kept tablets, thousands upon thousands of clay tablets, inscribed with cuneiform writing, recording celestial observations going back centuries. These tablets contained predictions, omens, interpretations. They noted that when Venus appeared in a particular way, a king had died. When an eclipse occurred during a certain month, a flood had followed. They were creating the world's first database of astronomical and astrological knowledge. But these observations were not for everyone. Astrology in Babylon was primarily concerned with the fate of the kingdom, not individuals. The stars spoke to kings, warned of invasions, predicted the success of harvests that would feed entire cities. The movement of planets was tied to the movement of history itself. Imagine being a Babylonian priest, climbing the steep stairs of a ziggurat as the sun sets, the day's heat beginning to fade. You carry your clay tablet and stylus. You know the positions where the planets were yesterday, last week, last month. You know the ancient records that go back generations before you were born. Now you must watch, must see if Mars has moved as the calculations predicted, must note any unusual brightness or dimness in Jupiter's light. The sky darkens, stars appear one by one. And there is Marduk, great Jupiter, exactly where the tablets said it would be. You exhale. The universe is following its ordained path. The gods are maintaining order. The king will be pleased. But wait, what is that? A sudden streak of light across the sky. A shooting star, unexpected. You must record this. It might be an omen. A message from the gods that was not predicted, not anticipated. Tomorrow you will consult with the other priests. We'll search the old tablets for similar events. We'll try to understand what the heavens are saying. This was astrology in its infancy, not the personal horoscopes we know today, but a sacred science, a way of reading the divine will written in the movements of the wandering stars. The Babylonians believed the universe was orderly, that the gods had created patterns that repeated, that the future could be known if one could read the signs carefully enough. This was not superstition to them, it was the highest form of knowledge, combining observation, mathematics, and theology into a unified understanding of reality. And from Mesopotamia, these ideas would spread. Part 2. Egypt. The planets as hours and souls. The Nile River flows north through the Egyptian desert, bringing life to a land that would otherwise be barren sand. The ancient Egyptians built their civilization along this river, utterly dependent on its annual flood to water their crops and renew their soil. The Egyptians were obsessed with cycles, the daily cycle of the sun crossing the sky, the monthly cycle of the moon, the yearly cycle of the Nile's flooding. They saw the universe as fundamentally rhythmic, orderly, eternal, and they saw the planets as part of this great cosmic order. But Egyptian astronomy developed somewhat differently from Babylonian astronomy. The Egyptians were less concerned with detailed predictions and omens, and more focused on integrating celestial observations into their complex religious worldview. The Egyptians saw the sky as a goddess Nut, her body arching over the earth, covered in stars. Each evening, Nut swallowed the sun, and it traveled through her body during the night to be reborn at dawn. The stars were souls, the spirits of the dead, sailing across Nut's body in boats. The planets, too, were divine. The Egyptians called Venus the one who crosses, because it appeared to cross from one side of the sun to the other, appearing now as an evening star, now as a morning star. They associated this planet with several goddesses at different times, but often with the goddess of writing and wisdom. Jupiter they called Horus, who limits the two lands, connecting the planet to Horus, the falcon-headed god of kingship. The appearance of Jupiter was seen as favorable for pharaohs, a sign of divine legitimacy. Mars, red and aggressive in appearance, was associated with Horus the Red, a warrior aspect of the god. Saturn they called Horus, bull of the sky, perhaps noting its slow, steady movement like a bull plowing a field. Mercury, fast and often hidden in the sun's glare, was Sebegu, connected to the god Seth, the trickster and storm god. But the Egyptians also made a unique contribution to planetary lore that would echo through centuries. They divided day and night into hours and assigned each hour to one of the 7 celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, and the 5 visible planets. This system created the concept of planetary hours, the idea that each hour of each day was ruled by a different planet, and that the influence of that planet would be strong during its hour. The first hour of Sunday was ruled by the Sunday, the second hour was ruled by Venus, the third by Mercury, and so on, cycling through all 7 celestial bodies throughout the day and night. This system had a beautiful mathematical elegance. If you started each day with a different planet ruling the first hour and cycled through all 7 planets for each of the 24 hours, you would find that each day of the week would begin with a different planet. And this is how we got our days of the week. Sunday, the Sun's Day. Monday, the Moon's Day. Tuesday, Mars' Day, from the Norse god Tyr, but originally the Roman Mars. Wednesday, Mercury's Day, from the Norse god Odin, but originally the Roman Mercury. Thursday, Jupiter's Day, from the Norse god Thor, but originally the Roman Jupiter. Friday, Venus's Day, from the Norse goddess Frigg, but originally the Roman Venus. Saturday, Saturn's Day. This Egyptian system of planetary hours would be adopted by the Greeks and Romans and would spread throughout the Mediterranean world. Every time you refer to a day of the week, you are echoing this ancient Egyptian astrological concept. The Egyptians also believed that the planets played a role in the journey of the soul after death. Just as the sun traveled through the underworld each night to be reborn at dawn, so too did human souls make a journey through the realms of the dead, encountering various gods and obstacles. Some texts suggest that the planets were stations or gates through which the soul had to pass, each planet presenting its own challenges or blessings. Picture an Egyptian priest in the temple of Ra, the sun god, at Heliopolis. The temple is quiet in the hour before dawn, the most sacred time. Soon the sun will rise, will be reborn, will begin its journey across the body of Nut once more. The priest has calculated that this morning Jupiter will be visible, bright and steady in the eastern sky, appearing just before the Sunday. This is auspicious. Jupiter is the planet of Horus, of kingship, of divine order. Its appearance before the sun is like a herald announcing the coming of Ra. The priest performs the rituals, chanting the ancient words, offering incense. The sky begins to lighten, and there is Jupiter, the bright wanderer, steady and sure. And then, in a blaze of glory, the sun appears, climbing above the horizon, banishing the darkness. The priest feels the rightness of it, the order of the cosmos maintained for another day. The gods are in their heavens, the pharaoh is on his throne. The Nile will flood at its appointed time. All is as it should be. But Egyptian astrology, like Babylonian astrology, was primarily concerned with the state and its rulers, not with individual lives. The planets spoke to pharaohs, guided the timing of religious festivals, marked the proper seasons for building temples or launching military campaigns. It would take the Greeks to transform astrology into something more personal, more philosophical, more deeply embedded in the fabric of daily life. Part 3. Greece philosophy meets the stars. The ancient Greeks inherited astronomical knowledge from both the Babylonians and the Egyptians. Greek traders and scholars traveled widely, bringing back not just goods but ideas. By the 4th century BCE, Greek thinkers had absorbed centuries of Mesopotamian and Egyptian sky watching and had begun to transform it with their characteristic love of philosophy and mathematics. The Greeks asked different questions. They didn't just want to record what the planets did, they wanted to understand why. What were the planets made of? How did they move? What principles governed their motions? And what did those motions reveal about the nature of reality itself? Pythagoras, the famous mathematician who lived in the 6th century BCE, was one of the first Greeks to seriously engage with planetary theory. He believed the universe was fundamentally mathematical, that numbers were the key to understanding reality. The Pythagoreans taught that the Earth and planets traveled in perfect circles around a central fire, not the sun, but a cosmic fire hidden from view. They believed that as the celestial spheres moved, they created a harmony of the spheres, a cosmic music too perfect for mortal ears to hear. Plato, writing in the 4th century BCE, described the cosmos as the work of a divine craftsman, the demiurge, who had created the planets and set them in orderly motion. For Plato, the regularity of planetary motion was proof of divine intelligence and design. The planets moved in perfect circles, the most perfect of all shapes in perfect mathematical ratios. But it was Aristotle, Plato's student, whose cosmological model would dominate Western thought for nearly 2,000 years. Aristotle placed the Earth at the center of the universe, unmoving, with the moon, sun, and 5 planets orbiting it in concentric spheres. Beyond the planets were the fixed stars, and beyond them, the prime mover, the divine force that set all things in motion. Each planet in Aristotle's system had its own sphere, its own perfect circular motion. Earth was the realm of change and decay, but the heavens were perfect, eternal, unchanging except for their circular motions. The planets were made of a 5th element, the quintessence or ether, a pure substance that existed nowhere on Earth. But the Greeks didn't just philosophize about the planets, they also made them personal. The Greeks adopted the Babylonian zodiac, but they transformed it. They gave the planets new names, connecting them to their own gods, reimagining the ancient Mesopotamian deities in Greek form. The swift planet became Hermes, the messenger god, quick and clever, who traveled between the mortal and divine realms. The brilliant evening and morning star became Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, desire and passion. The red planet became Ares, god of war, violent and aggressive. The majestic, slow-moving planet became Zeus, king of the gods, wielder of thunderbolts, father of gods and men. The distant, slow planet became Kronos, later to become the Roman Saturn. The ancient Titan, father of Zeus, associated with time and agriculture. And crucially, the Greeks made astrology personal. Around the 2nd century BCE, the concept of the personal horoscope emerged. Instead of casting charts only for kings and kingdoms, astrologers began casting charts for individuals based on the exact moment of their birth. The positions of the planets at that moment, the Greeks believed, would shape that person's character, fate, and life story. This was revolutionary. Suddenly, astrology wasn't just for rulers, it was for everyone. The cosmic drama of the planets wasn't just about the rise and fall of empires. It was about you, your loves, your struggles, your destiny. The Greeks believed each planet had certain qualities that it bestowed or influenced. Mercury, Hermes, governed communication, intelligence, travel, and commerce. Those born under Mercury's influence might be clever, quick-witted, good with words, perhaps also cunning or tricky. Venus, Aphrodite, governed love, beauty, pleasure, and harmony. A strong Venus in one's birth chart suggested a person who was charming, artistic, drawn to beauty and relationships. Mars, Aries, governed courage, aggression, energy, and conflict. Mars gave strength and boldness, but could also bring violence and recklessness. Jupiter, Zeus, governed wisdom, growth, abundance, and good fortune. Jupiter was the greater benefic, the most fortunate planet, bringing expansion, opportunity, and success. Saturn, Kronos, governed discipline, limitation, time, and karma. Saturn was the greater malefic, bringing challenges, delays, and hard lessons, but also wisdom, structure, and endurance. The moon governed emotions, instincts, and the subconscious. The sun governed identity, vitality, and conscious will. Greek astrologers developed complex systems for interpreting how these planets interacted with each other and with the 12 signs of the zodiac. When Mars was in Aries, it was strong and direct. When it was in Libra, it was weakened, uncomfortable. When Jupiter and Venus aligned, it was fortunate for matters of love and prosperity. When Saturn opposed the Sun, it suggested challenges to one's vitality or authority. Imagine a young Greek woman in Alexandria, the great cosmopolitan city where Greek, Egyptian, and Near Eastern cultures blended together. She has just given birth to a son. She wants to know what the stars say about his future. She goes to an astrologer, a respected man who has studied in the great library, who knows mathematics and mythology, who has charts and tables recording centuries of planetary positions. The astrologer asks the exact time of birth. He consults his ephemerides, his tables of planetary positions. He draws a circle representing the sky at that moment, dividing it into 12 houses, marking where each planet was positioned, which sign of the zodiac it was in, what angles the planets made to each other. "Ah," he says, studying the chart. "Mars is in the 10th house, in Leo. Your son will be ambitious, a leader, perhaps a soldier or a politician. But see here, Saturn opposes Mars from the 4th house. There will be struggles with authority, conflicts with his father perhaps. He will have to work hard for his achievements. Nothing will come easy. But here," the astrologer points to another part of the chart, "Jupiter is rising in Sagittarius and Venus is in harmonious aspect to it. He will be blessed with good fortune in his later years, will find love and happiness, will be generous and well-liked." The woman listens, trying to see the future of her tiny infant in these abstract symbols, these wandering planets. Will it all come true? Perhaps, perhaps not. But the chart gives her hope, gives her a sense that her son's life has meaning, is connected to the great cosmic order, is watched over by the gods. Greek astrology was sophisticated, mathematical, and deeply philosophical. It was about understanding one's place in the cosmos, aligning oneself with the will of the gods as expressed through the planets. It was about fate, but also about freedom. Knowing one's astrological nature meant one could work with it, cultivate strengths, guard against weaknesses. And from Greece, this rich astrological tradition would pass to Rome, where it would reach new heights of popularity and influence. Part 4. Rome, the planets of empire. The Romans were practical people, builders of roads and aqueducts, organizers of legions and laws, but they were also deeply superstitious, constantly seeking signs and omens, trying to ensure they had the favor of the gods. When Rome conquered the Greek world, it inherited Greek culture wholesale, and this included astrology. Roman astrology was essentially Greek astrology with Latin names. Hermes became Mercury, Aphrodite became Venus, Ares became Mars, Zeus became Jupiter, Kronos became Saturn. These planetary gods became central to Roman religion and culture. Each had temples, festivals, priests. They were invoked in poetry, depicted in art, sworn by in oaths. But more than this, astrology became essential to Roman political and social life. Roman emperors consulted astrologers regularly. The Emperor Tiberius kept the astrologer Thrasyllus close by his side, making no major decision without consulting the stars. The Emperor Hadrian was himself an accomplished astrologer and is said to have accurately predicted the date of his own death through his calculations. The casting of a horoscope for the emperor or for potential heirs to the throne was a serious matter. If an astrologer predicted that someone other than the emperor's chosen heir would come to power, that person might be accused of treason and executed. Astrologers themselves were sometimes expelled from Rome when their predictions became politically inconvenient, only to be welcomed back when they were needed again. Ordinary Romans, too, were fascinated by astrology. They consulted astrologers before marriages, before starting business ventures, before setting out on voyages. They wore amulets inscribed with planetary symbols for protection. They timed agricultural activities according to the movements of the moon and planets. The days of the week, based on the planetary hours we discussed earlier, became standardized throughout the Roman Empire. Merchants and officials everywhere understood that Tuesday was Mars's day, Wednesday was Mercury's day, and so on. Roman astrology also developed the concept of planetary rulership of different aspects of life. Mercury ruled merchants, travelers, and thieves. Venus ruled lovers, artists, and courtesans. Mars ruled soldiers and gladiators. Jupiter ruled kings, priests, and judges. Saturn ruled farmers, builders, and the elderly. Each planet also had metals associated with it. The sun ruled gold. The moon ruled silver. Mercury ruled quicksilver, liquid mercury. Venus ruled copper. Mars ruled iron. Jupiter ruled tin. Saturn ruled lead. These associations influenced alchemy, medicine, and magic throughout the Roman world and beyond. The great Roman poet Manilius, writing in the 1st century CE, composed an entire epic poem in 5 books called Astronomica, explaining the principles of astrology in verse. He described the zodiac, the planets, their influences, and how to cast and interpret horoscopes. For Manilius, astrology was not just a predictive tool, but a profound philosophical truth, the idea that humans were connected to the cosmos, that our lives reflected the eternal dance of the heavens. Imagine a Roman senator, ambitious and cunning, living during the reign of Augustus. He has risen high in Roman politics, but he wants more. He wants to know if the stars favor his ambitions. Late at night, disguised in a simple cloak, he visits an astrologer in a quiet part of Rome, away from prying eyes. Political astrology can be dangerous. Augustus himself has banned the casting of horoscopes that predict when the emperor will die. The astrologer's room is lit by oil lamps. Charts and scrolls cover the walls. The air smells of incense. "I want to know," the senator says carefully, "when might be a favorable time for me to advance my position." The astrologer nods. He already has the senator's birth chart prepared. It's not the first time they've met. Now he consults his tables of current planetary positions. "Saturn is currently transiting your 10th house," the astrologer says slowly. "The house of career and public standing. This is typically a challenging time, a time of obstacles and delays. But," he pauses, calculating, "in 3 months, Jupiter will enter your 10th house as well. When Jupiter and Saturn are both there, it creates a powerful combination. Difficulty, yes, but also the possibility of lasting achievement for those willing to work hard." "And Mars?" the senator asks. "Mars is his ruling planet. He was born with Mars prominently placed. Mars will be in its exaltation in Capricorn, in favorable aspect to your natal Sunday. You will have energy, courage, the ability to act decisively. But be cautious. Mars opposed by Saturn can lead to violent outcomes if you are too aggressive." The senator listens, nods, commits it all to memory. "In 3 months then, he will make his move in 3 months. When Jupiter gives opportunity and Mars gives courage, even if Saturn promises struggle. Will he succeed? The planets don't guarantee success. They only show favorable and unfavorable conditions. The rest is up to human will and skill." This was astrology in Rome, a mix of superstition and strategy, faith and politics, cosmic philosophy and practical planning. The Roman Empire would eventually fall, its western half collapsing into fragmentation, its eastern half transforming into the Byzantine Empire. But Roman astrology, preserved in manuscripts, protected by scholars, would survive and spread into the medieval world. Part 5. The Islamic Golden Age Mathematics of the Heavens. As the Roman Empire declined in the West, the light of learning shifted eastward. In the 7th and 8th centuries CE, the Islamic caliphates expanded across the Middle East, North Africa, and into Spain. Islamic scholars inherited the scientific knowledge of the ancient world, Greek philosophy, Babylonian astronomy, Persian mathematics, Indian numerals, and they took it further. The Islamic Golden Age, lasting roughly from the 8th to the 14th century, saw remarkable advances in astronomy and astrology. Muslim scholars didn't just preserve ancient knowledge, they refined it, corrected it, expanded it. Arabic-speaking astronomers built observatories, designed more accurate instruments for measuring planetary positions, developed sophisticated mathematical models for predicting planetary movements. They created detailed tables called ZJ, listing planetary positions for years into the future, making it easier to cast accurate horoscopes. Scholars like Al-Khwarizmi, famous for developing algebra, also compiled astronomical tables and wrote texts on astrology. Al-Battani made precise observations of planetary motions that corrected Greek errors. Ibn Yunus in Cairo created tables of unprecedented accuracy. Islamic astrology synthesized Greek, Persian, and Indian traditions. From the Greeks came the zodiac and the concept of planetary houses. From Persia came systems for interpreting planetary periods in a person's life. From India came sophisticated mathematical techniques and additional astrological concepts. The planets kept their Greek divided by Roman identities, but in Arabic translation, Mercury became Utarid, Venus became Zuhara, Mars became Mirik, Jupiter became Mushtari, Saturn became Zuhal. Islamic astrologers wrote comprehensive textbooks that systematized astrological knowledge. They categorized planetary influences, defined the exact degrees of the zodiac where each planet was strongest or weakest, developed precise rules for how planets interacted with each other. One of the most influential Islamic astrologers was Abu Mashar, known in Latin as Albumasar, who lived in 9th century Baghdad. His massive work synthesized Greek and Persian astrology and included extensive sections on how planets influenced not just individuals, but entire civilizations, religions, and historical epochs. Abu Mashar taught that major conjunctions of Jupiter and Saturn, which occurred roughly every 20 years, marked significant historical shifts. Greater conjunctions, when Jupiter and Saturn aligned in a new element, fire, earth, air, or water signs, marked even larger changes: the rise and fall of dynasties, the birth of religions, the movement of political power from one region to another. This concept of historical astrology fascinated medieval scholars, both Islamic and later Christian. It suggested that human history itself followed cosmic patterns, that the rise of Islam, the fall of Rome, all the great movements of civilization could be read in the dance of the two slowest planets. Picture a scholar in the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, the great library and translation center established by the Abbasid caliphs. It is the 9th century CE, and the Islamic world is the center of learning, a place where scholars of all backgrounds, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Zoroastrian, gather to share knowledge. Our scholar is working on translating a Greek astrological text into Arabic, but he is also making corrections. The Greek text claims Saturn takes about 29 years to complete its orbit, but the scholar's own observations and calculations suggest it's closer to 29.5 years. He makes a note in the margin, citing his sources. Outside, the city of Baghdad bustles with life. Trade caravans arrive from China and India. Mathematicians debate geometric proofs. Physicians study texts on the use of planetary timing in medicine, when to perform surgery, when to administer which remedies, all based on the positions of the moon and planets. Later, the scholar will attend a gathering where another astrologer is presenting a chart for the caliph's newborn son. The chart is complex, beautifully drawn, showing not just the positions of planets, but intricate geometric relationships between them, mathematical ratios that reveal hidden harmonies. The planets are more than gods here, they are mathematical realities, following laws that can be calculated, predicted, understood. And yet they are still divine, still mysterious, still the language through which God's will is expressed in the created universe. This was the achievement of Islamic astronomy and astrology, a perfect blend of rigorous science and spiritual meaning, of mathematical precision and cosmic philosophy. Islamic astronomical knowledge would eventually flow into medieval Europe through Spain and Sicily, places where Islamic and Christian cultures met and mingled. Latin translations of Arabic texts would reintroduce Western Europe to the astrological learning of the ancient world, enriched and expanded by centuries of Islamic scholarship. Part 6. Medieval Europe, Planets, and Providence. In medieval Europe, astrology was not considered separate from Christianity, but rather compatible with it. The planets were seen as part of God's creation, instruments through which divine providence worked. Thomas Aquinas, the great 13th century theologian, wrote that the stars did not control human will, that would contradict free will and make humans like puppets. But he accepted that the planets influenced the body, emotions, and circumstances, creating tendencies and opportunities. A wise person, Aquinas suggested, could use knowledge of the stars to work with these influences, not against them. Medieval universities taught astrology alongside astronomy. The quadrivium, the 4 mathematical subjects that every educated person was expected to study, included astronomy, which necessarily involved astrological calculation and interpretation. Medical astrology became particularly important in medieval Europe. Physicians were expected to know astrology because different planets ruled different parts of the body. The sun ruled the heart and vitality. The moon ruled the brain, stomach, and bodily fluids. Mercury ruled the nervous system and communication organs. Venus ruled the kidneys, throat, and reproductive system. Mars ruled the muscles, blood, and energy. Jupiter ruled the liver and growth. Saturn ruled the bones, teeth, and skin. A medieval physician would consult the patient's birth chart, note the current positions of the planets, and use this information to diagnose illness and prescribe treatment. Surgery was timed, according to the moon's position never operate when the moon is in the zodiac sign ruling the body part in question. For instance, bloodletting, a common medieval medical practice, was carefully timed according to planetary positions. The wrong planetary influence at the time of bloodletting could lead to complications or death, it was believed. Medieval kings and popes consulted astrologers. The founding of cities, the coronation of rulers, the launching of military campaigns all might be timed according to favorable planetary configurations. The planets also appeared in medieval art and architecture. Cathedral carvings might show the 7 planets with their associated gods. Illuminated manuscripts depicted the planets as divine powers seated on thrones, each surrounded by symbols of their influence. But medieval astrology was also anxious. Saturn, in particular, was feared. Known as the Greater Malefic, Saturn's influence was associated with melancholy, disease, old age, and death. When Saturn was prominent in a chart or appeared in difficult aspects to other planets, misfortune was expected. Mars, too, was problematic, the Lesser Malefic, bringing conflict, fever, and violence. Jupiter and Venus, by contrast, were the Benefics, bringing good fortune, health, love, and success. The medieval mind saw the cosmos as a hierarchy. At the bottom was Earth, heavy, corruptible, the realm of change and death. Rising upward were the crystalline spheres carrying the planets, each sphere more perfect and divine than the last. Beyond Saturn was the sphere of fixed stars, and beyond that, the primum mobile, the first mover, and finally the Empyrean, the dwelling place of God. Human beings stood at the center of this cosmic drama, influenced by the planets, but also possessing an immortal soul that could transcend planetary influence through divine grace. Imagine a medieval monk in a monastery in France. It is the early 14th century. The monk is an educated man, trained in the quadrivium, skilled in mathematics and astronomy. He has been tasked with calculating the date of Easter for the coming year, a complex calculation involving the lunar calendar and the solar year. But he also casts occasional horoscopes, quietly for members of the nobility who visit the monastery. The church officially frowns on predictive astrology, foretelling the future too precisely smacks of determinism, challenges divine providence. But diagnostic astrology, understanding character and tendencies, timing, medical treatments, this is acceptable, even encouraged. A local lord has asked the monk to examine the chart for his daughter's upcoming marriage. The lord wants to ensure the stars are favorable. The monk calculates carefully. The wedding is planned for when Venus is strong, in Libra, her sign of exaltation. Good. The moon is waxing, also good, symbolizing growth and increase. But he pauses. Mars is in opposition to Saturn. This suggests conflict, obstacles, perhaps between the families, perhaps in the marriage itself. He mentions this diplomatically to the Lord, who frowns. The monk suggests a slight delay in the wedding date, just 2 weeks, until Mars has moved past this difficult aspect. The Lord agrees. The wedding is postponed. Whether this makes any real difference, the monk doesn't know, but he has done his duty, has read the cosmic signs, has tried to align human action with divine celestial order. In the night sky above the monastery, the planets continue their endless dance, Venus bright in the west, Mars dimming as it moves away from Earth, Saturn steady and slow in the south. The monk watches them from the monastery garden before going to bed, feels the mystery and majesty of it all, offers a prayer of thanks to God for the beauty and order of creation. Medieval astrology would continue until the Renaissance began to transform it, as everything else, in the fire of new learning and old wisdom rediscovered. Part 7. The planets in Renaissance magic. The Renaissance brought a revival of interest in ancient texts, in Platonic philosophy, in Hermetic wisdom, supposedly dating back to ancient Egypt. Renaissance scholars rediscovered Greek and Roman writings on astrology, philosophy, and magic, often in Arabic translations made during the Islamic Golden Age. In Renaissance Italy particularly, astrology flourished alongside art, literature, and humanism. But now astrology was often combined with ceremonial magic, creating a rich synthesis of planetary invocation, talismanic magic, and Neoplatonic philosophy. Marsilio Ficino, a 15th century Florentine priest and philosopher, wrote extensively on how to draw down the beneficial influences of the planets. In his book, On Life, Ficino described how to construct talismans aligned with particular planets, how to surround oneself with colors, scents, and music that resonated with planetary energies, how to live in harmony with cosmic influences. If you wanted to draw down the influence of Venus, Ficino suggested, surround yourself with beautiful things, wear green and white, listen to harmonious music, inhale the scent of roses. All of these things were Venusian in nature and would attract Venus's influence of beauty, love, and pleasure. To invoke Jupiter, wear blue and purple, surround yourself with symbols of wisdom and authority, engage in generous and kingly behavior. To protect against the melancholic influence of Saturn, incorporate solar imagery into your life, wear bright colors, engage in joyful activities. This was astral magic, the idea that by understanding planetary natures and aligning yourself with them, you could improve your life, your health, your spiritual state. Ficino believed the cosmos was ensouled, that there was a world soul connecting all things, and that the planets were living beings, not just astronomical objects. By attuning yourself to planetary influences, you were connecting to this world soul, participating consciously in the cosmic harmony. Other Renaissance scholars took this further into explicit magic. Cornelius Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy detailed elaborate systems of planetary magic, including how to create planetary seals and sigils, how to invoke planetary spirits, how to time magical workings according to planetary hours. The 7 planets became the foundation of ceremonial magic systems that would influence occultism for centuries. Each planet had its own seal, its own intelligence, a beneficial spirit, its own demon, a harmful spirit, its own archangel. For the magician seeking to perform a working aligned with Mercury, for instance, they might wait for Wednesday, Mercury's day, ideally during a Mercury hour, with Mercury well positioned in the sky, and then invoke Raphael, Mercury's archangel. Call upon the intelligence Tyrael, inscribe Mercury's seal, and perform a ritual to enhance communication, learning, or travel. This was high magic, elaborate and learned, requiring knowledge of astrology, Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, access to rare texts and ingredients. It was practiced by a small elite of educated magicians, often physicians, priests, or scholars. But simpler forms of planetary magic persisted among common people as well. Farmers still planted by the moon's phases. Women timed their attempts to conceive according to lunar cycles. People wore planetary amulets for protection or luck, a Mars amulet for a soldier going to war, a Venus amulet for a woman seeking love. The Renaissance also saw a flowering of astrological literature. Horoscopes were cast for important figures, published, debated. Almanacs, cheap printed books, brought astrological information to ordinary people, predicting weather, suggesting planting times, offering general forecasts based on planetary movements. Picture a Renaissance noblewoman in Venice, a patron of the arts, educated in Latin and Greek, her palazzo filled with paintings and sculptures. She has commissioned a ceiling fresco for her library, and the artist is incorporating the 7 planets, each depicted as a classical god surrounded by symbols of their influence. There is Luna, the moon, silver and changeable, associated with water and travel. There is Sol, the sun, golden and radiant, the center of all. Mercury, with his caduceus, wings on his feet. Venus in her beauty, surrounded by roses and doves. Mars in armor, red and fierce. Jupiter enthroned, majestic and benevolent. Saturn old and saturnine, holding his scythe. The noblewoman understands these are not just decorations. They are a cosmic map, a reminder of the forces that shape human life, a meditation on the soul's relationship to the heavens. In the evening, she consults her personal astrologer about whether the stars favor a particular business venture her husband is considering. The astrologer casts a horary chart, a chart for the exact moment of the question. He examines the positions of the planets, their relationships to each other, and to the houses of the chart. Jupiter is in the 2nd house, he notes, and Venus is in harmonious aspect to it. This suggests profit and success. But Mars is also in the 7th house, suggesting competitors, possible conflict. The venture will likely succeed, but not without challenge. The noblewoman thanks him, makes a mental note to discuss this with her husband, considers commissioning a talisman engraved with Jupiter's seal to bring additional fortune to the endeavor. This was the Renaissance, a world where astrology was everywhere, where the planets were both astronomical realities and divine powers, where magic and science had not yet fully separated, where knowing the stars was a path to wisdom, power, and divine understanding. But change was coming. The planets themselves would soon reveal secrets that would begin to undermine the ancient astrological worldview. Part 8. The Scientific Revolution. The Planets Become Worlds. In 1609, Galileo Galilei pointed a telescope at the night sky, and the cosmos would never be the same. What Galileo saw through that crude instrument shook the foundations of ancient cosmology. He saw that the moon was not a perfect sphere but was covered in mountains and craters. He saw 4 moons orbiting Jupiter worlds, orbiting a world, proving that not everything revolved around Earth. He saw that Venus went through phases like the moon, proving it must orbit the sun, not the Earth. The old Aristotelian cosmos, with its perfect crystalline spheres carrying the planets around a stationary Earth, could not account for these observations. Earlier, Nicolaus Copernicus had proposed a heliocentric model, the Sun at the center, the planets, including Earth, orbiting it. His model was published in 1543, but had been largely dismissed as an interesting mathematical tool, not a description of physical reality. Now, with Galileo's observations, with Johannes Kepler's precise mathematical laws describing planetary orbits as ellipses rather than circles, with Isaac Newton's gravitational theory, explaining why planets moved as they did, the heliocentric model became undeniable. The planets were not lights fixed to crystalline spheres. They were worlds, physical objects obeying mathematical laws, moving through empty space under the influence of gravity. Mars was not just a red point of light associated with war and aggression. It was a world, perhaps similar to Earth, with features that could be seen through telescopes, polar ice caps, dark regions, lighter regions. Jupiter was not just the largest and slowest visible planet. It was a giant world, far larger than Earth, with its own system of moons, like a miniature solar system. Saturn, observed more carefully, was revealed to have rings, a feature so strange that early observers didn't know how to interpret what they were seeing. The discovery of Uranus in 1781 by William Herschel expanded the known solar system beyond the 5 visible planets that had been known since ancient times. Here was a planet that the Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans had never known existed. If the ancient astrologers had missed an entire planet, how complete could their system be? Neptune was discovered in 1846 through mathematical prediction before it was ever seen. Astronomers calculated where a planet must be based on irregularities in Uranus's orbit, then pointed their telescopes to that location and found Neptune. The planets obeyed mathematics, not mythology. The planets became objects of scientific study. Astronomers measured their sizes, calculated their masses, studied their atmospheres and surfaces. The planets were still named after Roman gods: Uranus, the Greek god of the sky; Neptune, the Roman god of the sea; and eventually, Pluto, the Roman god of the underworld, though Pluto was later reclassified as a dwarf planet. But these names were now just labels, not believed to be the actual dwelling places of gods. Astrology, meanwhile, became increasingly marginalized in educated circles. It was dismissed as superstition, a relic of a pre-scientific age. The planets moved according to gravity and inertia, not according to divine will. Their positions relative to Earth had no physical mechanism by which they could influence human affairs. Some astrologers adapted by incorporating the new planets into their systems. Uranus was assigned rulership over sudden change, revolution, technology. Neptune over dreams, illusions, spirituality. Pluto over transformation, death, and rebirth. But astrology's mainstream influence waned dramatically. It was no longer taught in universities. Physicians no longer consulted planetary positions when treating patients. Kings and presidents might still secretly consult astrologers, but they wouldn't admit it publicly. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, astrology seemed like it would fade away entirely, a curiosity from humanity's childhood, before science taught us how the universe really worked. But then, unexpectedly, astrology experienced a revival. Part 9. Modern Astrology. Psychological and popular. In the early 20th century, astrology began to transform again. It couldn't compete with astronomy as a science that battle was lost, but it found a new role as a psychological tool, a symbolic language for understanding human personality and development. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, was fascinated by astrology. He saw the planets and zodiac signs not as literal influences, but as archetypal symbols representing fundamental patterns in the human psyche. Jung collected and studied his patients' birth charts, looking for correlations between astrological factors and psychological types. For Jung, the planets represented archetypal energies. The sun represented the conscious ego, the sense of identity and purpose. The moon represented the unconscious, emotions, and instincts. Mercury represented thinking and communication. Venus represented relating and valuing. Mars represented assertion and desire. Jupiter represented expansion and growth. Saturn represented limitation and structure. When an astrologer said, "You have Mars in Scorpio," they weren't claiming that the planet Mars was literally causing you to be passionate and intense. Rather, they were using Mars as a symbol for your assertive energy, and Scorpio as a symbol for depth, intensity, and transformation. The combination described a psychological pattern, a way your psyche expressed itself. This psychological approach made astrology respectable again in some circles. It wasn't science, but it was a symbolic language, a tool for self-reflection, perhaps similar to tarot or dream interpretation. In the 1,960 seconds and 70 seconds, astrology experienced a massive popular revival. Newspapers began running daily horoscope columns. Astrology books became bestsellers. Magazines devoted entire issues to astrological themes. This popularization brought astrology to millions who knew nothing of planetary hours, medical astrology, or the complex mathematics of chart calculation. For many modern people, astrology meant simply knowing their sun sign. Were you an Aries or a Taurus, a Gemini or a Cancer? And reading generic predictions in the newspaper. Serious astrologers often looked down on this simplification. A real astrological chart required the exact time and place of birth and incorporated not just the sun's position, but the moon's, all the planets, the angles between planets, the division of the chart into houses, and much more. But the popularity of sun sign astrology did something important. It kept the ancient planetary gods alive in the popular imagination. Millions of people who had never heard of Marduk or Ishtar, who didn't know that Wednesday was named after Mercury, or that their use of the word jovial came from Jupiter, nevertheless knew that Venus ruled love and Mars ruled war, that Mercury governed communication and Saturn brought challenges. Today, astrology exists in a complex state. It is not considered a science by the scientific community. Studies attempting to verify astrological predictions have generally failed to show statistically significant correlations. The mechanisms by which planetary positions could influence human personality or events remain unproven and, according to known physics, implausible. And yet, millions of people find meaning in astrology. They consult their charts for insight into their personalities, their relationships, their life paths. They note when Mercury is retrograde, appearing to move backward from Earth's perspective due to orbital mechanics, and brace for communication problems. They wait for favorable Jupiter transits to start new ventures. Modern astrology is less about prediction and more about reflection. It's less about the planets as gods and more about the planets as symbols. It's a language, a tool, a way of thinking about time, personality, and meaning. Picture a young woman today sitting with her laptop, exploring astrology for the first time. She's entered her birth information into a website that generates a free chart. The chart appears on her screen, a circle divided into 12 sections, symbols scattered throughout, marking the positions of planets. She reads the interpretation: Sun in Virgo, Moon in Pisces, Ascendant in Gemini. Each placement comes with paragraphs of description. Some of it resonates deeply, yes. She does have that perfectionist Virgo tendency combined with a Pisces dreaminess. Some of it seems off or generic. She clicks on Mars in Capricorn and reads about how she expresses anger, how she pursues goals, disciplined, patient, strategic. The description says she thinks about this. Is she like that? Maybe. Or maybe she's reading meaning into vague statements. She's not sure if she believes in astrology. She knows the scientific critiques, but there's something compelling about it, something that feels psychologically true even if it's not physically true. That night, she looks up at the sky. She can see Venus, bright and beautiful, and maybe that's Mars, that reddish point of light. She knows they're planets, worlds like Earth, made of rock and gas, governed by gravity. She knows they don't literally control her fate, but for a moment, she feels connected to something larger, something ancient, the same sky that the Babylonians watched, the same planets that the Greeks named after gods, the same cosmic dance that has continued for billions of years and will continue long after she's gone. And in that moment, whether astrology is true or not seems less important than what it provides a sense of connection, of meaning, of place in the universe. Conclusion. The eternal dance. And so we come to the end of our journey through the history of astrological beliefs, from the ziggurats of Babylon to the smartphones of today, from the time when the planets were gods to the time when they became worlds and then became symbols again. The story of planets and gods is ultimately a story about human beings, about our need to find meaning, to feel connected to the cosmos, to believe that our lives matter in the grand scheme of things. For thousands of years, people looked at the wandering stars and saw gods looking back. They saw Jupiter's steady light as a sign of divine order and kingship. They saw Mars's red glow as a warning of conflict and battle. They saw Venus's brilliant beauty as a promise of love and pleasure. They saw Saturn's slow movement as a reminder of time's inexorable passage and the wisdom that comes with age. These beliefs shaped civilizations. They influenced when crops were planted and when surgeries were performed, when battles were fought and when marriages were celebrated. They gave structure to time itself, giving us our 7-day week and the names of our days. Science has shown us that the planets move according to gravity, not according to divine will. They don't cause events on Earth through any known physical mechanism. The correlations between planetary positions and human personality that astrologers claim have not been verified by rigorous scientific testing. And yet, the planets remain powerful symbols in our cultural imagination. When we say someone has a mercurial personality, we're echoing thousands of years of association between the swift planet and quick-changing moods. When we describe someone as jovial, we're remembering Jupiter as the bringer of joy and expansion. When we call a time period Saturnine, we're invoking Saturn's ancient associations with melancholy and limitation. The planets as gods may be gone, but the planets as metaphors, as archetypal symbols, as a language for discussing human experience, these remain. Perhaps that's what astrology has become in the modern world, not a science but a mythology, not a predictive tool but a reflective one, not a description of how the universe works, but a way of thinking about who we are and what we might become. The dance continues. The planets move through their orbits, as they have for billions of years, as they will for billions more. Mars glows red in the night sky, Venus shines brilliantly in the evening. Jupiter makes its slow, majestic circuit through the zodiac. Saturn traces its patient path, year after year. We watch them, as our ancestors did, and we wonder. We tell stories, we find meaning, and in doing so, we connect ourselves to every human being who has ever looked up at the night sky and asked the fundamental questions. What is our place in the cosmos? What forces shape our lives? What does it all mean? The planets don't answer. They only continue their eternal dance, silent and luminous in the vastness of space. But we answer in our myths and our sciences, our charts and our calculations, our ancient wisdom and our modern skepticism. We answer by creating meaning from light and motion, by weaving stories from the positions of worlds. And perhaps that's enough. Rest now. Let your breath slow, your thoughts gentle, your body relax. The planets are still there, still moving, still shining. They were there before you were born. They will be there long after you're gone. But for now, for this moment, you are here, under the same sky that has watched over humanity since we first learned to wonder, to watch, to dream. The planets drift across the heavens, the ancient gods sleep in our memories. The stories continue. Good night, sleep well. The cosmos keeps its vigil while you rest.